In this video tutorial, we are going to look at report writing and we are going to focus on natural disasters. So we're going to write reports for natural disasters. So stay tuned. In this lesson, we'll cover a series of objectives. We're going to look at writing natural disaster reports for a hurricane or a storm, a volcanic eruption, flooding, or an earthquake, okay? So 4 events we're going to write about: hurricane, volcanoes, flooding, and earthquake. And these are natural disasters that we can find around the Caribbean. We're going to look at a report firstly on an earthquake event. So the prompt states, an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.8 occurred in Trinidad and Tobago. Write a report for your blog so that the people across the world can see the extent of the disaster. Ensure to include details of date, time, and place, the extent of the disaster, and methods of recovery. So what we'll move on to now is a completed report, and I'm going to highlight to you the different parts on how your report is supposed to be structured. By now, you would have written a report about a natural disaster. Now is the opportunity to check over to make sure your report is guided along a similar path. So we'll start a report, and as you can see, we have our title, right? The title is at the very top. A report on an earthquake event in Trinidad and Tobago. And if most of you remember, back in 2018, we had an earthquake event that was of similar notation, right? It was similar, 6.8. So a report on an earthquake event, this is the title. Moving on now, we have to move on now to the introduction. And on Wednesday, the 10th of October 2018, around 5:15 in the evening, an earthquake of magnitude 6.8 affected the northern and central regions of Trinidad and Tobago. The impact lasted close to a minute, creating major damage. Details of this natural event follow on this report. So notice a couple things here. When we're talking about I'm looking at the annotation now. So when we're talking about the introduction, this first paragraph here is the introduction. Notice a few things coming out, please. Notice in the introduction, we have the date, we have the time, right? Around 5:15, we have the time in the evening. So remember, we have 5:15 in the morning and evening, right? But we mentioned it that it happened 5:15 in the evening, which is 5:15 p.m. We also stated that an earthquake of magnitude 6.8 affected the northern and central regions of Trinidad and Tobago. So this was the main idea of this report. We included that in the introduction. And the last main thing that the introduction has is this, what we call a transition line into the body. And if you remember our first video tutorial on report writing, we talked about a transition line that shifts the introduction to the body. So details of this natural event follows on this report, okay? So this is the end of the introduction now. Now we're gonna move on to the body, and the body is 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs in length. Now your report don't have to be this long, but if you have information for 4 paragraphs, you can go ahead and write it, but do not repeat any information. Remember, all numbers are written in all numerals are written in words, and we are not writing in the first person. We're not telling a story about how we feel. So remember, in a report, we only dealing with facts, right? True and relevant information. So areas, we're reading on the first paragraph of the body now, and I'm here. Areas in the northern range of Trinidad and Tobago were affected by landslides. This landslip creating a blockage along the North Coast Road. Trees and large pieces of debris fell from the mountain range. This created traffic, and many people were not able to commute. To add to this, major electrical and communication networks were affected by the fallen trees. Right? Moving on. Many homes of residents of the north of the island were destroyed. Some people were damaged due to cracking of the walls and destruction of sewage lines. Some residents even abandoned their homes as the structure was marked as unsafe and uninhabitable. So notice in each paragraph in the body, we highlighted different points. We started with the landslides in the northern range. We ended up with that creating traffic. So as a result of the landslide, we had traffic and major electrical and communication network disruptions. The next point now, we talk about many homes of residents in the north side of the island were destroyed. Some homes were damaged due to cracking. So we talk about destruction of homes and how people were left displaced. Now we go on to the third part. Further, roads and infrastructural developments were destroyed. So infrastructural developments are like bridges, walkways, roads, drainage, etc. Some large fissures means crack, like huge cracks on the surface, created on the roads made it difficult for motorists to drive by. Electrical poles fell, leaving many areas in a blackout. So they talked about the infrastructural developments, which include electricity, okay? There were also no internet service available and telephone lines were distorted. The Office of Disaster Preparation and Management, the ODPM, broadcasted that this was one of the most dangerous earthquakes in Trinidad and Tobago. So notice we have this body here. We had these people, the Office of Disaster Preparation and Management, ODPM, right? These people in Trinidad and Tobago is responsible for all natural disasters. They're not responsible for natural disasters. They're responsible for broadcasting information on the media about natural disasters. So it's very relevant to use them in your report, okay? Emergency shelters were set up and religious institutions for people who were left displaced. Cleanup actions were immediately issued to remove roadblocks, okay? This was our fourth paragraph. Now we move on to the almighty conclusion, which is this part here. The Prime Minister regarded the earthquake as a tragedy to the nation. So remember, we talk about opinions of special people. The Prime Minister is considered someone special or an expert, right? And he regarded this earthquake as a tragedy to the nation. The government issued grants for home improvement and various ministries sent out circulars educating the public about preparing for earthquake. From now on, Town and Country Division, which is another body, will have safety checks on homes to further ensure safety. Now, some of you children may not understand these bodies as yet, like ODPM and Town and Country Division. Town and Country Division pass inspectors and building codes on buildings. So you just can't put up a structure just so you can, but you will not have approval for it, okay? If you need a loan or if you need something. So you can ask your parents more about these bodies or you can Google them. And each of them have their separate websites and you can read up more about what they do. That way you will be more comfortable to fit them into your report. So we're continuing now to the other report. So this was a report on an earthquake activity in Trinidad and Tobago. And we're just going to continue on our presentation now. Next, we're going to look at a report on a flooding event. And everybody knows what is a flood, right? Every time rain falls and the drains clog with litter and polluted material, we have floods. Sometimes when the sea level is too high, we also have flood, right? So we're going to look at a report on a flooding event. And the prompt is, due to heavy rainfalls, major areas of your community experience flooding. Write a detailed report to account for the areas that were affected, damages done, methods of cleanup, and the measures in place for future occurrences. So now, when you're talking reports, right, and you have a prompt for a report, it is wise to always give the examiner what they asked for. So write a detailed report to account for the areas that were affected, the damages done, methods of cleanup, and measures in place for future occurrences. So these three things we must highlight in our report above everything else, okay? So we're moving on. Continuing, we have firstly our title, and our title looks like this: a report on a flooding experience in Trinidad and Tobago. It's highlighted at the top. So now we move on now to our introduction, which is this paragraph here, this first part here. Okay? The introduction is this first part right here, the first paragraph in our report. So it starts off with the date on November 23rd, 2018. There was heavy rainfall across Trinidad. So they start off with the date, and the reason for the report. There was major rainfall, right? Due to this, areas in central Trinidad and Chase Village, Chaguanas, Caroni, and Charleville experienced severe flooding. This flood was regarded as a 100-year flood causing havoc to the aforementioned areas. Aforementioned means it was mentioned before. So the areas such as central Trinidad, Chase Village, Chaguanas, Caroni, etc. are the aforementioned areas. Details are reported below. So this is our transition line, which moves us to our body. So now we begin the first paragraph. And notice we have our transitional words and phrases, okay? Notice that is very important in report writing. It helps the flow for the reader. Firstly, residents living in flat houses experienced water level up to 4 feet in height. Water entered homes, destroying furniture such as bed, couches, and main appliances that rested on the ground, such as refrigerators, stoves, and washing machines. Many residents were left displaced and stranded at their homes. Fishing boats were used to rescue the residents as vehicles were incapable of passing through the waters, okay? So we start with our first point in our first paragraph, and we talk about flooding and residents, meaning the people and their homes and how their homes were destroyed and what in their homes were destroyed and what mechanism was used to help them. In our second paragraph in our body now, we talk about the farmers. So many farmers, both agricultural and livestock, were affected by the flood. Many animals drowned in the rising flood waters and crops were left inundated means covered in water, okay? This created an economic burden on the farmers as hundreds of thousands of dollars were lost. The Ministry of Agriculture is tended to assess the situation with farmers to issue grants and subsidies to compensate the loss. So paragraph 2 reads about farming and how the farmers were affected by this flood. Thirdly, now we move on to many government institutions that were affected. Many government organizations and business places were swamped in floodwaters. Important documents and stocks were destroyed. Further, another transitional word here, further, vehicles in many of the affected areas were covered in water. Main water courses and drains were clogged with polluted materials such as bottles and garbage. Officials of the Environmental Management Authority now. So we have this body here now, Environmental Management Authority, EMA. So this part right here, officials of the EMA. EMA is another body that I want you to research, the Environmental Management Authority. And these are the people responsible for the recycling in our nation. Remember ICARE, TT, and so forth. They are under Environmental Management Authority. They are a government organization, an NGO, that is there to bring and help pass the laws dealing with the environment, such as pollution acts and so forth. So officials of the EMA assessed that improper disposal of method of waste and a lack of education about recycling is what contributed to the floods. Residents were given warnings about disposing waste. Further, any person caught in the act of littering will be fined according to the law. The flood affected areas were given, so in the last paragraph now, and this just basically wrap up about this entire flood thing, right? So the flood affected areas were given support by the government and various ministries, non-governmental organizations, as well as religious organizations, right? Within days, residents were given a new mattresses, laundry facilities to manage their day-to-day needs. Remember the last time we had this flood in Trinidad? Places like Unicoma and Courts, Standards and so forth were offering machines for people to go and wash their clothing. Well, this is an example, and we could have used this in the report, okay? Cleanup actions were in effect and grants were distributed to help sustain living conditions. So this was the report on flooding, right? So notice the transitional words and phrases or transition line to the body. The main point is separated in paragraphs and explained, and we have the date and the time and the after measures that they asked for in the introduction. Moving on. Now we're going to look at a report on a hurricane event. And a hurricane is a storm with wind speeds up to 120 kilometers per hour. So this is severe when you think about it. Houses fall ripped out off the floor, trees are uprooted, etc. Okay. So we have the prompt now. So the island in which you reside experienced a hurricane. Write a report giving details of date. So what were they asking for? Date, time, place, preparation methods, and the extent of the damages. Okay, so we need to include that in our report. Firstly, you see our title. The title. On the 15th of June 2016, Barbados was under hurricane watch as Category 4 storm named Stewie was approaching the island. So here we have date, place or location, and the reason, right? So let's put an R for reason. On Monday, the 17th of June, the island was under threat. So they have two dates in the introduction. One date is when they actually get the warning, and the second date, which is Monday the 17th, is when the island went under threat, right? The island was under threat. Details of this event follows on this report, and this is called the transition line. The transition line from the introduction to the body. Immediately after the warning was issued, residents began preparing for the passing of the hurricane. Windows were covered with boards, reinforcements were done to the roofs of houses, sandbags were placed at all main entrances to homes and business places. Supermarket stocks ran low as citizens stocked up on water, canned food, gas, batteries, flashlight, lamps, medication, first aid items, right? So this was paragraph 1, this whole part right here. Next, we move on to paragraph 2 of your body. Paragraph 2 of the essay, paragraph 2 of your body. Furthermore, so we see another transitional word coming in here. Furthermore, animals were placed indoors for protection, and all loose materials that was outside was stored. Emergency shelters were opened up in all schools and religious institutions. To add, hospital and health centers remain open in case of an emergency. Residents were asked to take all necessary precautions and remain indoors. During the passage of the hurricane, so we're on the third paragraph now of your body. During the passage of the hurricane, reports were made of coastal water rising, creating flooding. Water level reached up to 4 feet covering land area. Many homes were destroyed due to flood waters, roofs were blown off by strong winds, trees were uprooted, electrical and communication poles were destroyed, and many communities had no electricity or clean drinking water, right? So the body basically talked about, the first paragraph of the body talked about the warning in which people prepared for the hurricane, And the second paragraph also talk about the preparation for this hurricane. And the third paragraph talk about the actual extent of the hurricane, the damages. Now we go on to the conclusion. In the end, the government issued immediate cleanup action. So in the end is a transitional phrase. In the end, the government issued immediate cleanup efforts to clear areas that were affected, especially by the floodwaters. Non-profit organizations distributed food hampers, cleaning supplies, and mattresses for residents. Hurricane Stewie was classed by meteorologists, and a meteorologist is somebody who tracks the weather, as one of the worst storms to have affected Barbados in years. Okay, so we end off with a good note, and remember, we could have listed a body such as the you're dealing with Trinidad, the ODPM, right? So if you want to sound good on your report, stick to your home country if the prompt doesn't specify a country. So let's move on. So we're moving on to a report now on a volcanic eruption, or a report on volcanic eruptions, right? And the prompt goes like this. You and your family were vacationing on an island where a volcano became active. Write a report to highlight the event, ensure to include methods used to prepare and the aftermath of it all. So the report has our title, A Report on a Volcanic Eruption. Now, some of you may not know what is a volcano. A volcano is basically an opening on the earth in which magma and lava comes, right? So we will talk about it. And remember, a volcanic island is Grenada, so we use that. So on Monday, the 4th of February, 2018, so we have our date. The island of Grenada, we have our place, was under evacuation for a volcano. Here we have our reason. Kik and Jenny became active. I, Kyle Mohammed, was on vacation with my family and was able to document the entire event as follows. Right, so I, Kyle Mohammed, was vacationing with my family and was able to document the entire. So here we have our transition line, but what is key about this transition line is this part right here. You are writing on the first person and we declared ourselves. So in this part, Kyle Mohammed declared himself as the writer of this report, and this was used as the transition line as well. Around 6:30 in the morning, seismic activities was recorded as there were minor shakes felt by residents across the island. This created an alarm for citizens. 2 hours later, notice the transitional phrases. Sea waters became rough with high waves. The University of the West Indies Seismic Research Unit, which is a Caribbean body, UE research unit, issued immediate effect on evacuation plans to clear areas near the coast as the underwater volcano was given signs to erupt. Now, the UE Seismic Research Unit records earthquakes or any plate activities which deals with volcanoes, okay? All residents, so I'm on my third paragraph of this report, all residents, including tourists, were asked to express caution. Around 8 o'clock in the afternoon, loud explosions were heard as the volcano erupted. Lava and rocks ejected into the air and gas emission from the volcano polluted the sky. Boats on the marina were destroyed. Buildings on the coastal areas were also ruined. People residing near the coast evacuated, staying in shelters on the safer side of the island. Furthermore, there were no reported deaths, but the toxic gases affected the residents. People were asked to stay indoors and remain alert. The eruption continued for up to 8 hours. 2 days later, all flights out of the island were resumed. My family and I were able to leave. And we could have talked, my family and I, because Kyle declared himself at the introduction, right? In the end now, so we're in the conclusion. In the end, another transitional phrase, the island gained support from neighboring countries to help in rebuilding. The volcanic eruption created displacement among the people of Grenada. Affected residents from then relied on the support from others and the government to recuperate the losses succumbed to regain a comfortable living condition. So this here is the the conclusion of your report. And now we move on, and this was the end of our final report. So I hope you found this video tutorial helpful in terms of structuring reports on natural disasters. Remember to pause the video and take your notes, okay? And complete the exercises that I have attached for you to do. Thank you.